The receipt for that Timmy suitcase hit my desk 3 weeks ago. $450, charged to the corporate American Express, listed under office supplies. I circled it in red pen. You know that feeling when the numbers just scream at you? That was my first clue. But I didn't say a word. I just waited for the other shoe to drop. Or in this case, the suitcase to roll out. It was 8:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. We were in the hallway of our Mission Hills home. The air smelled like lemon polish and old money. Outside, the San Diego heat was baking the pavement. Inside, it was freezing. The AC was humming. A low, steady thrum. Richard was standing there. He looked like a man who had just won a prize. The suitcase was next to him. It was navy blue leather. Expensive. Tacky. Very Richard. "I'm leaving Alara," he announced. He used that tone, the one he uses with junior associates. "I've met someone. Her name is Chloe. I'm in love." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at his watch. It was a Rolex, a Datejust. I bought it for our 20th anniversary. It was ticking. Loud and expensive. Talk. 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 Time running out. "I'm sure she's lovely," I said. My voice was steady. Clinical. "I assume she likes expensive luggage." He blinked. He looked confused. He expected a scene. He expected a breakdown. He didn't expect forensics. "You don't understand," he said. He stepped closer. "I need to be happy. It's not fair to either of us." Fair. That word. I hear it a lot, usually right before someone tries to steal half my portfolio. If you've ever been gaslit, you know that tone. The one that makes you feel crazy for noticing the truth. I walked past him. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor. Click, click, click. I stopped at the mahogany console table. I opened the top drawer. The wood felt smooth under my fingers. I reached inside. There it was, a cream-colored envelope. Heavy stock. Vellum. I pulled it out. The date on the front was Friday, 3 days ago. He hadn't even packed the bag yet. But I had already packed the legal papers. "Take this," I said. "What is it?" He took the envelope. He looked skeptical. "Open it, Richard." He unfolded the paper. It was a letter, a cease and desist regarding our marital assets, prepared by Marcus Thorne, the best divorce lawyer in San Diego. "I paid the retainer last month, out of our joint savings. Technically, that's half my money anyway. The numbers always have to balance." He read the first line. His face turned white, like a sheet of paper. "This date," he whispered. "This date is from 3 days ago." "I know," I said. I checked my watch again. "I didn't get mad, Richard." I smiled, just a little bit. "I got a subpoena." The silence was heavy. It filled the whole hallway. He looked at the letter, then he looked at me. His eyes were wide. He was sweating, just a little bit on his upper lip. It smelled like his fear. And the lemon polish. He looked at the letter, then at me, and for the first time in 30 years, Richard looked scared. Tell me in the comments, would you have opened that door? Because what I found behind it changed everything. Richard is gone. The front door slammed shut 5 minutes ago. The house is finally quiet. I walked into my home office. The door clicked shut behind me. It's soundproof in here? Just me and the facts? People think accounting is boring. I think it's just addition and subtraction. It's not. It's a language. And like any language, it can be used to tell the truth. Or it can be used to lie. I want to take you back to where it started. November 2021. I was sitting in the kitchen. The morning sun was hitting the granite counter. It was a Tuesday. I remember the smell of the coffee. It was burnt. Richard had left the pot on too long. I was doing a routine review of our joint assets. I had my iPad Pro on the table. I opened the Chase banking app. I was looking for a monthly electric bill. Instead, I found a ghost. It was a charge for $200. The vendor was listed as Floral Arrangements. The location was Culver City. We live in San Diego. We don't know anyone in Culver City. Have you ever had that feeling where your brain stumbles over a detail that doesn't fit? It's like a puzzle piece that won't snap into place. I zoomed in on the screen. The pixels were crisp. The date was November 15th. 3 days before our wedding anniversary, Richard was supposedly in Sacramento that week for a conference. I sat there. The kitchen was silent. I could hear the refrigerator humming. My heart rate didn't spike. That's the accountant in me. I didn't panic. I calculated. $200 isn't a lot of money. Not for us. But it was the anomaly. The deviation. In my world, the deviation is where the body is buried. I took a screenshot. I saved it to a folder labeled Tax Docs 2021. Richard never looks at taxes. He thinks they are beneath him. That was his first mistake. I remember touching the screen, tracing the numbers with my fingertip. I felt a cold sensation in my chest. Not jealousy, just clarity, pure, crystalline clarity. I checked the previous month, October, no charge. September, nothing. But November, there it was. I ran a quick search on the vendor name. Floral Arrangements, Culver City. Nothing came up. No website, no Yelp page, no storefront. It was a shell. A ghost vendor used to wash money through or to pay someone off. I looked at the coffee mug in my hand. My reflection was distorted in the dark liquid. I smiled. I actually smiled because I knew something he didn't. He thought he was invisible. He thought he was smart, but he just gave me the first thread. I pulled on that thread for 3 years. And trust me, the sweater unraveled fast. In my line of work, $200 isn't money. It's a scream. Once you see the lie, you can't unsee it. That $200 floral charge was just the crack in the dam. I needed to see the flood, so I upgraded my surveillance protocol. I stopped looking at the paper trail and went straight for the source. It was a Tuesday. Richard was out playing golf at the country club. I went into his home office. The air in there smelled stale, like old paper in his cologne. I opened his desktop tower case. The fans inside were humming, a low, steady drone. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keylogger. It was a tiny black USB dongle. I plugged it between the keyboard cable and the motherboard. It snapped into place. I closed the case. It looked untouched. Perfect. You might be wondering, was I nervous? Honestly, no, I was doing my job. Forensic accounting is just auditing with higher stakes. The waiting was the hard part. 2 weeks passed. Every night, I checked the logs from my iPad in the kitchen. Just work emails. Spreadsheets, nothing. Then came the night of November 23rd. It was 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. The house was dead silent. I sat at the kitchen island. The granite was cold under my elbows. I opened the terminal window on my iPad. The data stream began to scroll. Pages of raw text, keystrokes, timestamps. Then it stopped. I saw the login. The timestamp was 11:45 p.m. Richard had been on his computer while I was in the shower. The username was richiev_unseeker@protonmail.com. The name itself was a confession. Then came the password, Chloe2do2do. I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked at me. A name, a year, a birth certificate for the betrayal. My hands went ice cold. My stomach turned over, but not from sadness. It was anger. Cold, calculated anger. That password triggered a memory. 2 years ago, 2020. Richard suddenly insisted on handling all the mail himself. He said our identity was at risk. He rented a P.O. box downtown. He got the key. He never told me the number. He said it was for sensitive documents. I thought he was protecting our retirement. He was building a bunker. The log showed me more. He sent an email that night. The subject line was empty. The attachment was a PDF named Wired Transfer Unscathed Instat PDF. I realized then that Richard wasn't just cheating. He was moving money, and he was doing it on our computer. I walked back to the bedroom. Richard was asleep. He was breathing heavily, mouth slightly open. He looked so peaceful, so innocent. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching him. I knew things about him now that he didn't know I knew. I felt powerful, but I also felt lonely. Do you know that feeling? Having a secret that changes everything, but having to act like nothing happened. I got back into bed. I didn't sleep. I just lay there listening to him breathe, counting the minutes until morning. Men think they're geniuses because they know how to use incognito mode. They forget that incognito mode doesn't hide the bill. The PDF attachment sat in the drafts folder like a ticking bomb. I knew I couldn't open it on the desktop. So I did what any sane person would do at 2:15 a.m. I went hunting. I slid out from under the heavy down comforter. Richard was snoring. A low, rhythmic rumble that usually annoyed me. Tonight it was useful, cobber. The hardwood floor in the hallway was freezing against my bare feet. I walked past the guest room. The door was closed. I turned the knob to the home office. It was pitch black. I didn't turn on the light. I sat in the ergonomic chair behind the desk. The leather was cold. It sent a chill up my spine. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out my iPad. It was an older model, but it worked. I navigated to the Instagram app. I logged into a burner account I keep for due diligence. The username was generic, AntiagoMom88. The profile picture was a cat. Nobody suspects the cat account. I typed Chloe into the search bar. Then I filtered by recent accounts. And there she was, the third one down. Tack, Chloe Sims Official. Her bio was public. It read, living that soft life in SD. Travel, tan lines, and good vibes. She had 12,000 followers. I tapped on her grid. It was a masterclass in oversharing. I scrolled back to November of 2021. My thumb moved slowly. I was looking for a specific date. November 15th, the day of the strange floral arrangements charge. There it was, a photo posted at 8:42 p.m. The location tag was George's at the Cove. The caption was short, date night with my favorite. He knows the way to my heart. I tapped the photo to expand it. It was a mirror selfie in the bathroom. You know these photos. The lighting is perfect. The pose is practiced. But she missed something. In the corner of the frame, on the marble counter, there was a receipt. I took a screenshot of the post. Then I opened my photo editing app. I zoomed in on the receipt. It was slightly blurry. I adjusted the exposure and the contrast. The text sharpened like magic. I could see the logo. George's at the Cove. I could see the items ordered. Oyster Tower. 2 glasses of Cabernet. Valet parking. The total was circled at the bottom. $340.50. I put the iPad down and picked up my phone. I opened the Chase banking app. I navigated to the corporate Amex account. The one Richard controls. The one he thinks I don't check. November 15th. There was a transaction at George's Modern Cuisine for $340. The category was listed as client entertainment. Richard didn't have a client that night. He was entertaining her. On the company dime. That is textbook embezzlement. I paused for a second. Asked yourself, would you have kept looking? Or would you have thrown the iPad against the wall? I kept looking. I went back to her profile. I scrolled to the next week, November 18th. It was a photo of a designer bag. The lighting was golden hour. Very artsy. I recognized the bag immediately. It was a Gucci GG Marmont. Small, leather, Mädelasse. I checked the Gucci website. Retail price $2,400. I went back to the bank statement. November 18th, a charge at UTC Westfield Office Supplies. The amount was $2,412. He categorized the designer handbag as office supplies. That is just insulting to my intelligence. You know that feeling? When you realize someone thinks you're stupid? It burns. But I didn't get mad. I got a spreadsheet. I looked at the comments on her post. One stood out. It was from a user named Richie V. Secret. He had commented, "You deserve the world, babe." He used a heart eyes emoji. I screenshot that too. Evidence of direct communication. Evidence of affection, and honestly, I want to know what you would have done. Would you have confronted him right there? I didn't. I just kept scrolling. I was building a profile. I found another post from December. A close-up of a watch. A Rolex Submariner. The caption said, "Time is on our side. Early Christmas present." I bought Richard that watch. It was an anniversary gift. It cost $18,000. He told me he lost it at the Torrey Pines golf course. He said he was devastated. He wasn't devastated. He was re-gifting to his girlfriend. I leaned back in the chair. The room was spinning just a little. I looked at the glowing screen. This girl thought she was living a fairy tale. She thought she found a generous, successful older man. She didn't know she was a pawn. She didn't know that every meal, every bag, every piece of jewelry was a transaction I could track. She wasn't just a mistress. She was a line item in a budget I hadn't approved. I double-clicked the file on the desktop. The cursor spun. Then the document opened. It was a PDF, a standard wire transfer template. But the destination field made my blood run cold. The Cayman Islands. The amount was blank, but the account number was already filled in. It was Richard's signature, digitally inserted. He wasn't just spending money on Chloe. He was spirating it out of the country. I checked the document metadata. It was created last October. He had been planning this for months. This wasn't a midlife crisis. It was a heist. I sat there in the dark. The monitor glow was the only light in the room. I felt the strange calm wash over me. I knew what I had to do. I had to freeze the assets before he drained the well dry, and I had to act fast. The sun came up over Mission Hills. It was a harsh, bright morning. I didn't sleep. I just showered and got dressed. I grabbed my purse. I walked out to the garage. The engine turned over. I felt like I was driving a getaway car. I headed straight for the Whole Foods on University. It seemed like a normal Tuesday. Shoppers were buying kale and overpriced oat milk. I blended right in. I picked up a woven basket. I walked to the coffee bar. I ordered an iced coffee. Then I found a corner. I sat down near the floral department. The lilies smelled strong. Then I pulled my iPhone out of my pocket. I opened the Chase app. Then I opened the banking app for the new credit union. I had opened it online the night before. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was playing the game. The numbers never lie, Richard. And now you were the one being audited. I looked at the screen. Our joint savings account, the balance was healthy. For now. I typed in the transfer amount. $15,000. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. It was enough to build a legal war chest. My thumb hovered over the button. Confirm transfer. If I did this, there was no going back. This was financial warfare. I want you to pause for a second. What would you have done? Left the money and hope for the best, or taken what was yours? I didn't hesitate. I pressed the button. The screen pulsed. Processing. My heart hammered against my ribs. I could hear a baby crying in the next aisle. A cart squeaked by on the concrete floor. The mundane noise was comforting. Then the notification popped up. Transfer complete. The money was gone from our joint account. It was safe in a new account. I took a screenshot. The timestamp was 9:42 a.m. The confirmation number was there in black and white. I saved it to the cloud. I stood up. My knees felt a little weak, but I walked tall. I paid for my coffee. I walked out to the car. I sat in the driver's seat for a minute. The leather was hot. I watched people walking into the store. They had no idea. Richard called me at noon. His voice was cheery. Just checking in, Alara. He sounded so confident, so arrogant. I smiled at the phone. Everything is fine, Richard. I kept my voice flat. Just enjoying my day. He had no idea his bank account was lighter. He didn't know I had the receipts. He thought he was the smart one. He thinks he's the wolf on Wall Street. But he's just a bad math problem, and I'm the one with the red pen. I drove home. The windows were down. The air smelled like eucalyptus and exhaust. I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't stealing. I was conducting a hostile takeover of my own life. That $15,000 was secure, but my mind was still racing. I sat back down at my desk in the home office. It was 2:30 a.m. The house was completely silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. My eyes landed on the photo of Richard from last year. He was wearing that navy suit, the one he took to Las Vegas. He claimed it was the regional sales summit. Mandatory attendance, he said. I have to network, Alara. It's crucial for the firm. I stayed home and walked the dog. I opened my laptop. The screen glow illuminated my face in the dark room. I navigated to the Google Maps timeline dashboard. You know the one. It tracks your every move if you aren't careful. I had his phone synced to my iCloud account months ago. I typed in the dates for that Vegas trip. The map loaded. A jagged red line appeared across the screen. It showed his movement from the airport to the Mandalay Bay. That part was true. He checked into the hotel, but then the timeline took a sharp detour. He didn't go to the convention center. He went to a place on Industrial Road. I zoomed in on the satellite view. The pin was right on top of the Spearmint Rhino. He was there for 7 hours. I checked the timestamp on the location data. It was 20 p.m. on a Tuesday. Keynote speeches don't happen at strip clubs. The red dots on the map were so precise they moved in a rhythmic pattern, back and forth between the bar and the ATM. It was a frenzy of spending. Then I opened the PDF of our joint brokerage statement. I scrolled down to the withdrawals section. April 12th, $400. April 13th, $600. April 14th, another $500. The location of the ATM matched the club perfectly. There was a specific surcharge code on the statement. $8 in fee for out-of-network cash withdrawal. I felt that cold fury rising in my chest. I remembered the phone call he made to me that night. It was late on that Tuesday. "I'm just leaving the banquet, honey." The speeches ran long. But in the background, I heard something thump, thump, thump. Heavy bass music, and then a loud woman's laugh. I thought it was the hotel casino. I was wrong. He was calling me from the floor of a strip club. He was lying to my face while withdrawing our savings. I opened my desk drawer. I pulled out the crumpled receipt I had saved. I had fished it out of his suit jacket pocket. The paper smelled like stale whiskey and cheap perfume. I smoothed it out on the desk. The ink was smudged, but the numbers were clear. 2045 a.m. Cash withdrawal, $200. He told me the Wi-Fi at the hotel was bad. He used that excuse to avoid FaceTime. "The signal is terrible in the conference rooms, Alara." I bet the signal was fine in the VIP room. I looked at the total sum for that trip. $2,300. That was supposed to be for a new roof. Or maybe a cruise for our anniversary. Instead, it was stuffed into a G-string. He deducted those cash withdrawals as travel expenses on his taxes. The man is an idiot. He thinks the world is as blind as he wants it to be. But the numbers are right there. They don't have an allegiance to him. They only tell the truth. If you've ever played the detective in your own marriage, you know this feeling. It changes you. You stop seeing a husband and start seeing a suspect. I took a sip of my cold coffee. It tasted bitter. I remembered asking him about the trip when he got home. He said he was exhausted. Too many meetings, Alara. I barely slept. I bet he didn't sleep. I bet he was wide awake, watching money disappear. He was using our retirement fund to buy lap dances. That's not a midlife crisis, Richard. That's theft. Silence has a physical weight. It presses against your eardrums like deep water. That was the feeling in the house last month. Our youngest son, Leo, had just left for UC Berkeley. I stood in the doorway of his bedroom. The mattress was stripped bare. There was nothing but a plastic mattress protector reflecting the afternoon sun. It looked like a crime scene. I stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under my loafers. I opened the closet door. It was completely empty. Just wire hangers and a smell of old cedar. I flashed back to the driveway. We were loading the car. The Honda Civic suspension was groaning. We had packed mini fridges, textbooks, and a giant bean-bag chair. I looked in the rearview mirror. Mascara was running down my face in black rivers. Richard was standing by the trunk. He kept checking his watch. "We need to hit the road, Alara," he said. "The 405 is going to be a parking lot." He tapped the steering wheel, rhythmically, like he was counting down the seconds. I assumed he was just impatient with traffic. But now, I see the timeline differently. He needed to get back. He had an appointment he couldn't miss. Have you ever looked back at a memory and realized you were watching a different movie? Because I replay that drive constantly now. Back in the bedroom, I touched the top shelf of the closet. It was thick with dust, but something else was missing too. 6 months ago, in March, I was putting away laundry. I saw a corner of blue paper. It was tucked behind a stack of old sweaters. A Tiffany & Co. bag. Small, expensive. I logged it in my head, gift for Chloe. Hidden in our son's closet. Classic paternal misdirection. Now the space was just dust. He had moved the evidence. He thought the empty nest meant he could operate freely. That evening, I walked into the kitchen. It was 8 p.m. The under-cabinet LED lights cast a harsh, clinical glow on the granite. Richard was standing by the island. He had a bottle of Veuve Clicquot in his hand. Pop! The cork hit the ceiling. He didn't even look up. He poured the amber liquid into 2 flutes. "Here," he said, sliding one across the counter. The condensation on the glass was cold against my palm. "To freedom," he said. He raised his glass high. His eyes were locked on mine, daring me to cry. "No more kids! No more noise!" He took a long sip. Just us. He leaned in close. He smelled like whiskey and expensive soap. He kissed my cheek. It lingered a moment too long. "No more witnesses," he whispered softly. My stomach turned over. The numbers in my head started spinning. No more witnesses implies there were witnesses to hide from. The kids were the alibi. The kids were the reason he couldn't travel. Now they were gone. He thought the constraints were removed. He didn't know I was the one watching him. He didn't know I was the auditor. I wonder what you would have done in that moment. Would you have thrown the wine in his face? Or would you do what I did? I took a sip. It tasted like vinegar. I smiled. It was a tight, calculated smile. To the future, I said. He clinked his glass against mine. Clink. The sound was sharp, like a gavel striking a sound block. He toasted to her freedom. He didn't know I had already signed his eviction notice. That champagne toast was just the appetizer. The main course was scheduled for 9 a.m. the next morning. I drove downtown to the high-rise on Broadway. The sun was reflecting off the glass skyscrapers. I parked in the underground garage. The elevator ride took forever. I watched the numbers climb. 12, 13, 14. By the time the doors opened on floor 15, I was ready. I walked into Marcus Thorne's office. It smelled like old money and mahogany. The conference room was cold. The windows overlooked the harbor. I could see the ships moving in the water. It was peaceful. I sat in the leather chair. It squeaked when I moved. Marcus was already seated at the table. He didn't say hello. He just waited for me to start. I put the fireproof box on the desk. It landed with a heavy thud. I opened the latches. Inside lay the original prenuptial agreement from 1988. The paper was brittle. Richard's signature was there in blue ink. He was so young then. He thought that paper was a shield. He was wrong. It was a loaded gun. I turned to page 4. I pointed to the section on dissipation of assets. It was buried under all the legalese. In simple terms, if you spend marital money on a fling, you pay it back twice. Marcus looked at the page. He adjusted his glasses. He asked, "Are you sure he didn't read this?" I said, "He never reads the fine print. He never does." Then I handed him the black binder. It was labeled Tax Docs 2021, a boring name for a weapon of mass destruction. He opened it. His eyes widened. It was full of receipts. Receipts for the Gucci bag, wire transfers to the Caymans, the $200 charge to Floral Arrangements, the shell company. Every dollar he spent on Chloe was documented. Marcus picked up a printout of the Cayman account. He whistled low. $15,000, he read, and another one for $10,000. He looked at me. He is hemorrhaging money. I took a sip of my water. It was cold, but I didn't care. Let him bleed, I said. You guys always ask about the cheating aspect. You think the affair is the big story, and honestly, I get it. It's juicy. But infidelity is just a moral failing. Embezzlement? That goes to the bank. It goes to the IRS. And this is the part you guys need to understand. Richard thinks he's so smart. He thinks he hid the money. He moved the Tiffany bag. He opened the secret P.O. box. But he forgot one thing. I am a forensic accountant. I don't guess. I calculate. He's walking around right now thinking he's safe. He thinks the prenup protects his precious assets. He thinks he can just walk away with half. The air conditioning hummed quietly in the room. I adjusted my blazer. I felt light. The weight of 35 years was lifting off my shoulders. Marcus tapped on a specific page, the wire transfer. He said, "This is the smoking gun." I nodded. Commingling funds. It turns community property into stolen property. Marcus closed the folder. He looked at me over his glasses. He smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Marcus looked at me and said, "Alara, we aren't just going to win. We're going to dismantle him." It was 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, the day Richard finally walked out. I stood in the front hallway of our Mission Hills home. The house was perfectly still. The air smelled of lemon polish and silence. In my hand, my phone vibrated. Once. Twice. It was the security alert. I looked out the side window. The blinds were tilted just enough to see. The Range Rover was idling in the driveway. It was a black tank of a car. Richard was on the sidewalk. He was dragging that Toomey suitcase behind him. It was the same bag he bought on the corporate Amex. Office supplies. Right. I took a deep breath. I needed to compose my face. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I practiced a look of devastation, a woman abandoned. I opened the front door. The San Diego heat hit me instantly. It was already 80 degrees. The sun was blinding. I walked onto the porch. My bare feet felt warm on the wood. Next door, Mrs. Higgins was pruning her roses. She stopped to watch. She was the audience. I had to give her a show. I leaned against the doorframe. I slumped my shoulders. I pressed a handkerchief to my eyes, let out a soft sob. It was all theater. But the grief for my marriage was real once. Richard looked up. He saw me crying. He didn't look sad. He looked impatient. He checked his watch. A heavy gold piece I bought him for our anniversary. He walked up the driveway steps. He stopped 3 feet from me. He said, "Alara, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be." His voice was sharp, like he was scolding a clerk. I looked at him. My eyes were wide and watery. I whispered, "You're leaving me? For her?" He sighed. A long-suffering exhale. He said, "We discussed this. I'm seeking happiness. You should try it sometime. You know that feeling when someone talks down to you and you just want to laugh?" I swallowed the laugh. I forced a frown instead. Just then, a horn blasted from the street. Honk! It echoed down the quiet cul-de-sac. I looked past Richard. A white convertible was parked at the curb. Chloe was in the driver's seat. She was waving her hand out the window. She was wearing those oversized sunglasses, the ones that cover half your face. She looked young. She looked oblivious. I checked my phone screen. The live security feed was running. The timestamp in the corner read 10:14 a.m. I could see Richard's face on the screen. He looked flustered. He looked back at the car, then back at me. He said, "That's my ride. I have to go." I gripped my phone tighter. My thumb hovered over the app. It was a simple banking app, but it was loaded with nuclear codes. Marcus and I had set up the triggers last month. We weren't just divorcing him. We were financially decapitating him. Richard adjusted his tie. He smoothed his jacket. He said, "My lawyer will be in touch. Try to be reasonable, Alara." He actually said reasonable. The man who stole $500,000 was telling me to be reasonable. And honestly, I want to know what you would have done in that moment, because I almost slipped. I almost laughed right in his face. Instead, I nodded solemnly. I looked at the ground. I said, "Goodbye, Richard. I hope she makes you happy." He nodded. He thought I was broken. He turned and walked down the driveway. He didn't look back. Not once. He threw his bag in the back seat of Chloe's car. It landed with a thud. Then he climbed in. The convertible peeled away. Music blared for a second, then faded. I stood on the porch. Mrs. Higgins was still watching. I gave her a weak, tragic smile. She nodded sympathetically. Poor Mrs. Vance. Left all alone. The moment they turned the corner, my face went blank. I walked inside and locked the door. Deadbolt. Chain lock. I walked into the kitchen. The iPad was on the counter. I opened the Tax Docs 2021 file one last time, just to be sure. Then I opened the Bank of America app. I navigated to the joint accounts. There was the balance. A healthy 6 figures. For now, I tapped the Freeze Account button. A pop-up appeared. "Are you sure?" I tapped yes. Then I opened the credit card portal. I selected his Amex, the platinum one. Status active. I swiped the toggle to frozen. I did the same for the Visa, the MasterCard, the gas card. I watched the spinning circles on the screen. Processing. Processing. Done. I imagined them at a drive-thru somewhere. Ordering lunch. The cashier would swipe the card. Declined. Try again. Declined. I sat down at the kitchen island. The marble was cold under my elbows. The house felt different. Larger. Lighter. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. I poured a glass of iced water. The condensation dripped onto the table. I took a sip. It tasted like victory. Richard thought he was starting a new life. He didn't know he was walking into a cage I built 3 years ago. I looked out the kitchen window. The driveway was empty. I raised my glass to the empty space. I waved goodbye to my husband, but I was actually waving goodbye to his bank account. It was 7:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was standing in the center of my kitchen. The house felt different without him. Larger, quieter, cleaner. I set a mug of chamomile tea on the marble island. The silence was heavy, but I liked the weight of it. I had just sat down when my phone buzzed. It rattled loudly against the court's countertop. The screen lit up the dark room. Caller ID. Husband. I stared at the flashing name on the display. I didn't answer. I just watched it ring. You know that feeling when you finally hold the winning hand? It's a calmness you can't fake. I picked up my mug. The tea was steaming hot against my palms. Richard was likely at George's at the Cove right now. It's that expensive spot with the harbor view. He loves being seen there. Mostly, he loves when the waitstaff recognizes him. I pictured him sitting across from Chloe at the crisp white tablecloth. The flickering candlelight. He probably ordered the sea bass. It runs $45. He definitely ordered a bottle of Cabernet. Probably the Opus one. It's $200 a bottle. He's trying to buy her affection with community property. I wonder if you would have felt sorry for him. I didn't feel a thing. Then the waiter comes. That awkward moment in every fancy restaurant. The black leather folder lands on the table. Richard reaches for his Amex Platinum. He hands it over with that little arrogant wrist flick. The waiter runs the card. He pauses. He frowns at the machine. He runs it again. I can see the waiter's polite, confused face. "I'm sorry, sir. The card is declined." Richard would have laughed it off nervously. "Machine error," he'd say. "Try the Visa." So the waiter tries the Visa. Same result. "I'm sorry, sir. Declined." That's when the panic sets in. I bet Chloe stopped smiling immediately. I bet she checked her own phone. Richard is sweating in his navy suit. He pulls out the Shell gas card. Desperation makes people do stupid things. Declined. The math is colder than the ice in their water. My phone buzzed again on the counter. The vibration buzzed against my knuckles. 8:12 p.m. Another missed call. Then a text message popped up. "Call me now." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my tea. It was perfect temperature. I opened the Bank of America app on my iPad. I refreshed the joint checking account page. Current balance, $0, and a waiver else. Available credits, $0. It was the most beautiful spreadsheet I had ever seen. The forensic audit had triggered the freezes at exactly 6,000 p.m. Right on schedule. I checked the investment app too. The brokerage link was severed. The wire transfer to the Caymans had bounced back instantly. If you've ever waited for karma, you know this moment. It is absolutely worth the wait. The phone started ringing again at 8:30 p.m. It vibrated against the stone, making a low humming noise. I let it go to voicemail. Then I pressed play. I put it on speaker. "Alara, what the hell is going on?" His voice was shaking. "I can't pay for the dinner. The valet kept my keys. I'm stuck here." "Answer me." I deleted the message. The house was quiet again. I walked to the window. I looked at the empty driveway. His Range Rover was gone, but his money was safe. My money was safe. The phone rang one last time. 9 p.m. sharp. I finally hit the green button. "You froze the accounts?" he screamed. "No, Richard," I said. "Forensic accounting did." The house was completely silent. I sat at the marble kitchen island. The granite felt cold under my palms. It was 9:15 p.m. Richard was likely still screaming at the valet. Have you ever felt that specific kind of quiet? The heavy silence that comes right after you detonate a bomb? It feels like pressure in your ears. I poured a glass of iced water. My hand was steady. The ice cubes clinked against the glass. A sharp, crystal sound. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was Marcus. He didn't need to speak. The email attachment was everything. I opened the PDF on my iPad. The document was titled Notice of Dissipation. The letterhead was stark. Black text on white paper. Legal and lethal. Marcus had already sent it. It went to Richard's email. And to Chloe's. Yes, he copied her too. I scrolled down to page 3. Line item 4 caught my eye. Cartier Love Bracelet. Date, February 14th. Amount, $7,450. Richard told me he bought a client gift. He called it a custom engraved trophy. The numbers never lie, Richard. I zoomed in on the scanned receipt. The signature was messy. It was definitely hers. Chloe's handwriting loops were childish. Do you think he felt stupid or just scared? Personally, I was banking on pure, unadulterated terror. The next morning, Richard found a coffee shop. He needed Wi-Fi. He needed to see why his cards were dead. I pictured him there, sitting in a plastic chair. The air smelled like burnt espresso beans. He held a lukewarm latte. His phone was face down on the sticky table. Then the email notification popped up. He opened the attachment. The Notice of Dissipation. He read the section on travel expenses, the Mandalay Bay charges, the hostesses listed as independent contractors for tax purposes. I flagged every single charge. Marcus had calculated the interest. He added the legal fees. He even added the cost of the forensic audit, every penny. But that wasn't the worst part. No, the worst was further down. He saw the property records. The unit in the gas lamp district. a luxury loft with city views. It wasn't in his name, it was in hers. I traced the wire to the title company. It happened on a Tuesday. While I was at the dentist, he used a debit card linked to a Shell account. The property tax bill came to my old address. A simple clerical error. That was his mistake. He bought her a downtown loft. 4-to-ceiling windows. A view of the harbor. All paid for by our joint savings. My chamomile tea had gone cold. I didn't care. I just stared at the screen. I felt nothing. Just a cool clinical satisfaction. The landline rang. The sound was jarring in the quiet house. I walked over to the wall unit. I almost didn't pick it up. "Alara, please." His voice was cracking. It wasn't a yell anymore. It was a wet, broken sob. I can explain the condo. He was gasping for air. "How did you find the condo?" "I used to trust." I looked at the photo of our kids on the fridge. I remembered the tuition payments. The years I stayed home with the flu. I didn't say a word. I just pressed the red button. And that silence, that was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Before I tell you what he did next, I want to ask you something. Could you have stayed that silent? Or would you have screamed? Let me know in the comments. You probably think Richard is just a cheater. I did too, until I opened the drafts folder on his desktop. I was sitting in the home office. It was 2 a.m. The only light came from the monitor. It cast a pale blue glow on my hands. I remember the room smelled like old paper and his lemon cologne. I was looking for the Cayman transfer records, but I found something much worse. There was an email saved in drafts. It was addressed to the State Bar Association. The subject line made my blood run cold. Involuntary transfer of funds by spouse. I clicked it open. My hands were shaking so bad the mouse clicked twice. He had written a statement. It was a confession letter, signed with my name. The text read, "My wife Alara has been struggling with severe mental instability. She accessed the trust fund credentials. She forced me to initiate the wires." He attached a PDF. It was a transfer authorization, $200,000. I looked at the date, November 12th, 2021. The exact day I found the floral receipt. I felt sick, like someone had punched me in the stomach. You know that feeling when the floor drops out from under you? That was me, sitting in a leather chair, realizing my husband was framing me. He wasn't just spending money on Chloe, he was stealing it. The source account was the Henderson Trust, a client fund, not our marital assets. $400,000, siphoned from a dead man's estate to buy Chloe a loft. And when the auditors came knocking, he was going to point the finger at me. He was going to say I was a gambling addict, mentally unfit, and honestly, I want to know what you would have done. Because for a second, I was terrified. He's a good liar. He's charming. But he made one mistake. The same mistake he always makes. He forgot to wipe the hard drive. He forgot about the digital footprint. I remembered the P.O. box key, the one I found in his golf bag last year. I drove straight to the post office on 5th Avenue the next morning. The sun was barely up. The pavement was still wet with dew. I opened the box. Number 402. There was a single envelope waiting. It was the quarterly statement from the Cayman Bank. He used the P.O. box to hide the statements from his partners, but he needed that key. And I took it. I made a copy. I held the statement in my hand. The balance was $0. He'd already moved the money to the property title company. That property tax bill, the one that arrived at our house by mistake, that was the thread that unraveled the sweater. It proved he used a shell company debit card to buy the loft. It proved the commingling of funds, the embezzlement, the fraud. I sat back in the chair and looked at our wedding photo on the desk. 35 years, and he was willing to let me go to prison for tax evasion. I took a screenshot of the email draft. I emailed it to Marcus. Then I forwarded it to the district attorney. That is why I could hang up the phone so calmly on Richard. He thinks he is just facing a divorce. He thinks he is just broke. He is about to find out what happens when you cross a forensic accountant. I heard the phone ring again. It was probably him, calling back to beg. But I was done listening. I was already building the case file. I picked up my coffee. It was ice cold, but I didn't care. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The world was quiet, but in my head, the verdict was already read. Richard Vance is going down, and I am the one who pushed him. He didn't just want a divorce. He was willing to let me go to prison for his fraud. Depositions are usually boring. I know I've been to hundreds of them, but this one? This was a symphony. We were in a conference room on the 20th floor of the high-rise downtown. The glass walls overlooked the harbor, but nobody was looking at the view. I was sitting at the end of the table. Marcus was next to me, shuffling papers like a deck of cards. Richard was across from us. His tie was loose. His hair was messy. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. And Chloe? She was sitting next to him, looking like a deer in headlights. You know that feeling when you realize you've been played? That was the vibe in that room. Marcus started slow. He asked Richard about the office supplies, just the tummy suitcase. $450. Richard said it was for client presentations. Marcus slid the receipt across the table. This was purchased at the UTC Westfield Mall, Richard, not Office Depot. Richard turned pale. Then Marcus moved on to the floral arrangement. $200. Richard said it was for a funeral. Marcus put a photo on the table. It was a screenshot of Chloe's Instagram. Flowers in her arms. Caption, my hero. The date? November 15th, the same day as the funeral. I watched Chloe's face. She looked at the photo. Then she looked at Richard. She didn't know. She actually thought he was at a funeral. That's when I felt it. A cold, sharp spike of satisfaction. I took a sip of my iced water. It tasted like victory, but Marcus wasn't done. He brought up the big guns. The Henderson Trust. Did you or did you not transfer $200,000 from this client account? Richard's lawyer objected. Marcus ignored him. He pulled out the transfer authorization. It had Richard's signature on it. Richard said he had permission. Marcus laughed. From whom? The client has been dead for 3 years, Richard. Silence. Absolute silence. You could hear the air conditioning humming. Richard started sweating. I could see a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. Chloe was staring at him now. Her eyes were wide. She was doing the math. No money, no presents, no loft, just lies and theft. And then Marcus dropped the bomb. The photo from the dealership. It showed Richard and Chloe. They were smiling, holding keys to a white convertible. The timestamp was clear. It was our anniversary. Richard told me he was at a funeral in Sacramento that day. 2 funerals in 1 year? That's ambitious. Marcus leaned forward. You bought her a car on your wedding anniversary. With client funds. Chloe stood up. She knocked her chair over. It made a loud crashing sound against the floor. She looked at the photo. Then she looked at Richard. She didn't say a word. She just grabbed her purse. Her hand was shaking. I watched her walk to the door. She didn't look back. Richard tried to follow her. Chloe, wait, baby. I can explain. He reached out for her arm. She pulled away, like he was contagious. Then Marcus slammed the bank statements on the table. The sound echoed through the room. Chloe stopped at the door. She looked at Richard. It wasn't a look of love anymore. It was the look you give a stranger you don't want to know. The front door clicked shut. The sound echoed through the hallway. Chloe was gone. Richard just sat there. His face was completely blank. Marcus didn't miss a beat. He tapped his pen on the mahogany table. The sound was sharp. Mr. Vance, let's discuss the Henderson Trust. Richard looked like a deflated balloon. He slumped in the leather chair. The color had drained from his cheeks. You know that moment when the villain realizes the movie is over? That was exactly this. She didn't know, Richard whispered. He wasn't talking to Marcus. He was talking to the ceiling. Doesn't matter, Marcus said. He slid a document across the table. You did, and now you're going to pay for it. 3 days later, I parked downtown. The San Diego sun was beating down on the pavement. I walked into the federal building on Front Street. The security guards checked my bag. The metal detector beeped. I walked through. The air conditioning inside hit me like a block of ice. I sat across from Agent Miller. He had a badge on his hip. He looked tired, like he'd seen too many men like Richard. I reached into my purse. It was a black leather tote. My fingers brushed against the cool metal. I placed the silver USB drive on the metal desk. It was small, but it held a life's worth of lies. Tell me in the comments, could you turn in the person you loved, even if they were a criminal? This contains the wire logs, I said. My voice was steady. I pointed to the screen, the transfers to the Caymans, and the shell companies. I watched him plug it in. The folder icon appeared on his monitor almost instantly. Agent Miller picked up the drive. He turned it over in his hand. And the forged emails? He asked. He opened the digital folder. All in there, I said, including the draft to the state bar framing me. For 35 years, I protected his secrets. Now I was handing them over to the government. It felt strange, like turning off a life support machine. Later that night, I sat on my couch. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I checked my phone. The time was 11:27 p.m. A news alert popped up on the lock screen. The app was bright in the dark room. The headline read, "Financial advisor under investigation for wire fraud." Seeing his name in print, it didn't make me happy. It just made me tired. People ask if I felt guilty handing him that drive. I didn't. I didn't do it to save him. I did it to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. If you've been following along, thank you. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. I have so much more to tell you. Drop a like if you made it to the end of this chapter. And turn on notifications. Next time, I'll show you Richard's realization. He wasn't just losing his wife. He was losing his freedom. Tell me in the comments what you think he deserves. By the time the FBI finished with Richard, he didn't even have a chair to sit on. You want to know what happens when the government decides you're a liability. You disappear financially. I sat on my balcony in Mission Valley. The air was starting to cool down. I opened the Zillow app on my iPad. I typed in the address of the Mission Hills home. The loading circle spun, then the screen refreshed. There it was. The listing photo. The front door repainted blue in 1995. The gardenias I planted were overgrown. Right above the photo, the status had changed. Sold. I tapped the details. 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 3,200 square feet. The final sale price was listed in bold red numbers. $2.2 million. $50,000 over asking. Richard didn't get a commission check. The feds seized the proceeds the moment the wire transfer cleared. It all went to the victims fund. People think accountants are boring. They think we just count beans. But really, we count consequences. Richard thought he could hide the decimals. He thought he could round down the morality. But the math always catches up. That house was the asset. It was the collateral for everything he borrowed. When the lien hit, it collapsed like a house of cards. I got in my car. I drove toward the house. I parked 2 blocks away. A U-Haul truck was idling in the driveway. It wasn't a full-sized moving truck, just the smallest van they rent. Richard was at the back of it. He wasn't wearing a watch. His cufflinks were gone. He was dragging heavy black contractor bags. He threw them into the back of the van. One bag caught on the latch. It ripped. A stack of white dress shirts spilled out. They hit the asphalt. Dust flew up. He didn't pick them up. He just kicked them into the gutter. Then he slammed the van door shut. He looked up at the house one last time. He looked smaller than I remembered. Like he had shrunk in the wash. The Range Rover was gone. The bank seized that last Tuesday. The accounts in the Caymans? Frozen by the Department of Justice. He had 0 liquidity. He climbed into the driver's seat. It was a beige Chevy Malibu. A rental. I followed him. I kept 3 cars between us. We took the I-5 north. The sun was setting over the ocean. It was beautiful. He probably didn't even look. He took the exit for Oceanside. We drove past the harbor. He turned into the parking lot of the Highway 101 motel. It's not a place you stay on purpose. The sign flickered. Vacancy. The V was buzzing. He parked in front of room 104. He grabbed his bags. He didn't look around. I parked across the street. The windows were down. I could hear the traffic rushing by on the freeway. It sounded like the ocean, but harsher. Through the sheer curtains, I saw him sit on the bed. The mattress spring sagged. He put his face in his hands. He just sat there. He was wearing a tie. Even in a motel lot, he was wearing a tie. But it was loosened, hanging crooked. It was the same tie he wore to our son's graduation. He looked like a ghost. I watched him for 10 minutes. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. Not pity, not joy, just quiet. The ledger was finally balanced. I started the engine. I drove back to my new apartment. It's a 1-bedroom in Little Italy. No memories. I poured a glass of wine. I put my phone on the charger. Then it buzzed. A text message notification. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew the area code and I knew the tone. It was short. Desperate. Chloe texted me. She asked if I knew he was broke. I blocked her. The sun was finally setting over Point Loma. It painted the sky in deep, bruised shades of purple. I was sitting on my sister Sophia's patio. The air smelled like jasmine and the charcoal smoke from her neighbor's grill. It was peaceful. Too peaceful. My phone was face down on the glass table. I'd blocked Chloe's number just 10 minutes ago. The silence felt heavy. Sophia watched me like I was a bomb that might finally explode. She poured more wine into my glass. The liquid swirled gold and amber in the fading light. "You did the right thing," she said softly. I looked at the houses on the hill. Their lights were flickering on one by one. You know that feeling when you finally exhale after holding your breath for years? That was this moment. 2 years ago, this conversation looked very different. I remember sitting right here in this exact chair. It was 2022. I had a stack of Amex statements on my lap. The paper was warm from the sun. Back then, Sophia told me I was paranoid. She took a sip of her Sauvignon Blanc. "You need to stop looking for trouble, Alara," she had said. "Just talk to him. Go to therapy." I wish I could have just talked, but the numbers didn't offer conversation. They just screamed embezzlement in bright red ink. Have you ever noticed how people think accountants are boring? We aren't boring. We just pay attention to what you ignore. You know those business trips Richard took to Vegas? The ones he called regional sales summits? He would disappear for 4 days at a time. I found the withdrawal slips later. He drained our joint brokerage account. $50,000 in 1 week. He told me he lost it at blackjack. "A foolish mistake," he said, looking at the floor. But I ran a blockchain trace on his laptop. He wasn't gambling. Not a single dollar. He was buying crypto. Hard currency transferred into cold digital wallets. And the wallet addresses? They were registered to Chloe's family. He used her mother's name. He used her sister's. Can you believe that? He used a mistress's mother as a mule. That isn't a midlife crisis. That is federal racketeering. The sun finally dipped below the horizon. The patio lights buzzed and flickered on above us. A moth slammed against the bulb, frantic and trapped. Suddenly my chest felt like it was cracking open. It wasn't a panic attack. It was grief. Delayed, heavy grief. I put my head in my hands. I couldn't stop the sound that came out. It sounded like a wounded animal in the dark. Sophia was out of her chair in a second. She knelt beside me on the concrete. "I know," she whispered. "I know now. I let myself go. I cried for the version of Richard I loved. The one who didn't exist yet, never would. It's been 3 months since he walked out. I haven't cried once until right now, not even when I found the second phone, not when I froze his bank accounts. The crying stopped as fast as it started. I blew my nose on a linen napkin. The fabric was rough against my skin. I looked at my sister. She looked tired, but she finally understood. She thinks I was preparing for a breakup, but that isn't true. I wasn't preparing for a divorce, Sophia. I was preparing for a crime scene. Just a financial one. The indictment came on a Tuesday. I was sitting in my living room. The sun was setting over the Point Loma Hills. My phone buzzed on the marble coffee table. It was Marcus. He didn't write a text message. He just sent a PDF file. I opened the attachment. The header was stark and official. United States Dirt Kurt, Southern States of California. I scrolled down the screen slowly. Case number 3-2023 CRO451. United States of America versus Richard Vance. It looked beautiful in black Helvetica font. Count 1, wire fraud. Count 2, money laundering. Count 3, conspiracy to commit bank fraud. The numbers never lie, Richard, and neither do federal prosecutors. I zoomed in on the asset forfeiture list. The Cayman accounts, the shell companies, the crypto wallets. It was all there. They listed the total amount, $2.4 million, every penny he stole, plus interest, plus penalties. I took a screenshot of that number. It was higher than I calculated. Then I emailed it to Sophia. Subject line, done. I didn't feel a sudden rush of relief. Not yet. It felt more like an audit had finally balanced. The ledger was clean. I poured myself a glass of wine. A Cabernet. I sat on the leather sofa and watched the evening news. He took a plea deal 2 weeks later. He didn't want to risk a trial. The evidence was a mountain. Marcus said he looked small in the courtroom. He wore an ill-fitting gray suit. No handcuffs, but he looked trapped. He agreed to 5 years. He waived his right to appeal. 3 months passed. The seasons changed in San Diego. The jacarandas bloomed and dropped their purple flowers on the sidewalk. Then a white envelope arrived in the mail, no return address, just a postmark. Los Angeles. Federal Correctional Institution. I recognized the shaky handwriting immediately. I used a silver letter opener. The sharp metal sliced the paper cleanly. 2 pages, single-spaced, blue ballpoint pen ink. It smelled musty, like old library books and industrial disinfectant. It smelled like desperation. I scanned the first paragraph. He talked about pressure. He talked about mistakes. He blamed the economy. He blamed his partners. Then he blamed Chloe. He called her a bad influence. He said he missed his life. He missed his home. He asked for a visit. He asked for forgiveness. I read the last line twice. I know you still love me, Alara. My hands were steady. I didn't cry. I just felt cold. I walked into the kitchen. Then I went out to the patio. I have a small fire pit there. I stacked some dry kindling. I struck a long match. The wood caught fire with a sharp crackle. I held the letter over the orange flame. The paper curled up at the edges. The blue ink turned black, and it disappeared completely. The smoke smelled like burning plastic. I watched his apology turn to gray ash. I dropped the crumpled remains into the pit. They glowed red for a moment. Then they faded to dust. I swept up the cold ashes the next morning. I dumped them into the trash can. He wanted my forgiveness. I gave him a prison sentence instead. And honestly, I want to know what you would have done. Would you have written him back? Or would you have burned it too? Tell me in the comments. I really do want to know. This is the second to last chapter. If you want to see how this story finally ends, hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you are here for the finale. Drop a like if you think he got what he deserved. And leave a comment. I read every single one. I'm sitting in my new living room. The sun is setting over the harbor. It's a view I pay for myself. Not with a trust fund, with alimony and settlement interest. The walls are a soft clinical white. There are no family photos here. No pictures of a fake life. Just art I bought with my own money. It's a new machine. Clean. No hidden partitions. No keyloggers. Just me and my cursor. No clutter. I have my laptop open on the marble coffee table. Abstract pieces. Sharp angles. The spreadsheet on the screen is open. It's not titled tax docs or evidence. It says Paris 2025 in bold black font. Column A lists departure dates. Column B lists first class airfare. Row 4 is highlighted. May 15th. Single occupancy. The total cost is staggering, but the line item solitude surcharge is set at 0. Priceless. I added a new row just now. Item. Dinner at Le Jules Verne. Cost €450. Quantity 1. Just me. You know that feeling when the noise in your head finally stops? It's been 3 months since Richard went away. 3 months of absolute silence. I used to wake up at 3 a.m. scanning bank statements for anomalies. Now I wake up because I want to watch the sunrise. I got up to refill my coffee mug. It's a simple white ceramic, not the fine china Richard insisted on. He said that china was an investment. He said it was legacy. I sold it all. Every last plate. Every crystal flute. I liquidated the assets and bought this condo. Cash. No mortgage. No liens. Sole owner. Just a deed with my name on it. Alara Vance. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The glass is cold against my forehead. Down on the street, people are rushing home, to spouses, to secrets, to mortgages they can't afford. I remember the night I found the keylogger. My hands were shaking then. My pulse is racing now. My hands are steady, very steady. Richard sent a letter from the federal penitentiary last week. He asked if I could visit. He said he found God. Or a new lawyer. I couldn't tell the difference. I didn't open the envelope. I just wrote return to sender on it. Then I burned it in the fire pit, just to be sure. I sat back down on the sofa. The leather is cool. I clicked the mouse. The cursor blinked at me. Waiting. I booked the flight to Paris. Confirmation number 8J9K2L. Seat 4A. Window seat. Just like I waited for 35 years. But not anymore. The next morning I have an appointment, not with a lawyer, with a travel agent. I passed the hallway mirror on my way to the kitchen. I stopped. I looked at the woman staring back. Her hair is silver now, no more dye, just natural gray. She smiled at me. It was a genuine smile, not the tight, grim line I wore for 35 years. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not sad. I'm just balanced. The books are balanced. The audit is over. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch, you know this feeling. It's terrifying, and it's exhilarating. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I prefer mine served with a forensic audit and a side of asset seizure. If this story meant something to you, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I've got more stories to tell. Some of them are even worse than this one. Like this video if you made it to the end. And drop a comment, tell me what you would have done. I read every single one.